Welcome to Agent of Commerce, the podcast exploring how AI is reshaping the future of e-commerce. Each episode features insights from the innovators driving real change in digital commerce. Agent of Commerce is brought to you by Meva. Now, here's your host, Rick Wilson.
Hey, everybody. I'm super excited today to have an old business colleague, friend, if you will, join us, Andy Hoar. Andy, I think I said his last name right. I'll ask him here in a second. But Andy used to be at Forrester, which is when I first met him, and then he is the founder and chief analyst at Paradigm B2B. So welcome, Andy. How you doing there? Did I say your name right? I never actually know.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fun you won't forget.
Well, a guy I've worked with at Meva before as a consultant. His name is Tom Cruise, but it's Crews. And like he's older. He's a little older than me, so maybe he's like 60 or something.
But do you look like Tom Cruise or not?
No. He looks nothing like Tom Cruise. He looks more like me than he looks like Tom Cruise. But he was like a biz dev sales guy, investment banker type, and he had learned how to leverage the name his whole career. And so it was pretty funny to be out and about with him. So Andy, before we jump in and discuss the future of AI and B2B, why don't you tell everyone about yourself real quick?
Yeah, so I'm CEO of Paradigm B2B, which you mentioned is kind of the research and consulting arm of my business. I do evaluations for technology platforms. Meva has always been in my evaluation. I also do work with manufacturers and distributors around their digital strategy. So I do that to keep my hands dirty. I just don't have a lot of time to dedicate to it. So I'm going to have one or two of those clients. The other area I spend my time on is on Master B2B, which is our global community. We have 100,000 people on our database now, 45,000 person reach on LinkedIn. And we've created this amazing community of just B2B e-commerce professionals representing a small $2.5 trillion market. And we connect them with each other. We help them solve their problems. And we help them select platforms and partners, et cetera. We do roundtables. We do research. We have a big summit. So there's a lot going on there. And I joke with my wife that I'm supposed to spend 50% of my time on Paradigm and 50% of my time on Master B2B. And I end up spending 100% of my time on both of them. So
I hopefully she forgives you for this.
She doesn't, just so you know.
Thanks for being here. I want to kind of talk a little bit about, look, you could actually go all the way back to the beginning of the transistor, but if you talk about in the age of the internet, there's been a few major shifts, right? So you had the internet, mid 90s, late 90s, where you had kind of static websites. And if you're our age or older, it was like 1 year at a Super Bowl, there was no URLs and ads. And then the next year at the Super Bowl, everyone had a URL in the ad. And I think that was 96 or so, 97, somewhere there. And at this time, those websites were just they were like brochures. They were just online brochures. They didn't do much, right? And then, but you had this first sort of generation of you build an app, you host an app, you do some stuff. And then SaaS came along, and then the mobile revolution came along, kind of no code at some level in there for running business software. And now I think we're at the next one, which is the AI revolution. Where would you rank it in comparison to all these things?
Next to fire. and I don't mean that flippantly. I mean, I think this is going to change humanity. I mean, there's no other way to phrase it. And, humans are the tip of the spear. Technology is the wood that's supporting the tip of the spear. And all the technology is going to change right before our eyes. I mean, there's really no other way to phrase it. I think 5 to 10 years from now, it will look radically different. The whole world will look radically different. And technology supporting that will look equally radically different.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's funny because there's always a sense of these things being slow than fast, if you will, right? And so like for those of us who are kind of in the space, it's been 3.5 years since ChatGPT 3 launched, or 3.5. And it was November of 22. And I remember it. I was talking to a board member who's also a tech guy. And like, have you seen this thing? And like, it was like the day it came out. And so in one sense, the 3.5 years, it's both moving very fast and kind of slow. I'm starting to take it for granted. In the other sense, I think in 10 years, it will look almost unbelievably different. How do you think, how do you see this? Like, where do you see the impact curve for, and do you clarify a difference between someone who's B2B, as in they sell to other businesses, versus B2B online? Like, how do you see how all this intersects?
Well, I would say one thing, first of all, it hasn't even been 3 years because it's August of 2025 and we're 3 months away
You're
from it
right.
being
Oh
3
gosh, I
years.
thought it was 3.5. I had added a whole 7 months to it.
I know about this because I did a presentation recently and I said, if you built a plan in August of 2022, you would not have included ChatGPT in it. And look at how much it's changed what you've done, and Quad and all the others, right?
Yep.
That was 3 years ago. And so I said this idea of like a 5-year plan is obscene. Having a vision is one thing, but you wouldn't have had a vision in August of 2022, much less a plan that wouldn't have been completely upended by this. So
That's true. That is 100% true. Our entire product roadmap, or I would say 90% of our product roadmap, the concepts of it did not exist 3 years ago.
yeah. And just imagine if you buy this idea that change is increasing at an increasing rate, what happened in the last 3 years could be eclipsed what happens in the next year and a half.
Yeah.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
That's nothing.
I mean, there is something to be said for, in the age of AI, what's different, like you had Moore's law around transistors. We still have Moore's law, right? I mean, it's sort of switched from transistors on a chip to compute power per watt, but whatever. The actual thing still exists. And the difference with AI is that it is, unlike other technology, it has a self-improvement capability, which is where you get the compounding impact.
Yeah, this idea of agentic, which I remember I uttered the word agentic like 9 months ago at a conference. I'm like, I'm not even sure I know what this thing is, but it's something I've heard about. I literally said, you want to pay attention? I called it agentic. I mispronounced it too. Reminds me of those people who said, what is internet? Like 30 years ago. So I said agentic. And I mean, I use that word probably 10 times a day now. And 9 months ago, I'd never heard of it. So this is how quickly this change is coming. But you asked a question about, how is this going to impact B2B?
Yeah.
And so I think there's going to be gradations to this, right?
Yep.
I think in some areas in B2C, it's already starting to impact these companies in a big way. B2B is going to be a laggard, but
I mean, that tends to be.
Yeah, not in every way though. So I think AI is going to affect the areas where B2B tends to be less of a lagger than people realize, like in the fulfillment and supply chain area. AI has already changed a lot of that stuff. I think for the smaller businesses, because there's B to big B and there's B to small b. Small B are like small businesses. I mean, companies like Lowe's, they've got independent contractors who are the small B. They operate a lot more like consumers, like really well.
Sure. Yep.
So that B is not going to be like the big B. It's going to be more like the C. And so if you're a company like Lowe's, you can't say, oh, that's my B2B business, like Lowe's for pros. It's going to be, no, these are the same people who wear a hat by day being a contractor and a hat by night as a dude buying stuff on Amazon for the family. They don't take those hats off. And
no,
the reality
of course
is
not.
that B to small b is going to be a lot like B to C. And I think it's going to drive B to big B. Now, they're going to be holdouts. Don't get me, don't misquote me on this one. There'll be companies who will try and claim that they're different. They're going to be companies using procurement systems that think that they need people to do this stuff until they don't.
Yeah, that's always the way in this. I mean, that kind of leads into a question I was going to ask you is, we've seen technology, as long as I've been in tech, automation is kind of part of the story, right? Technology is all about automating a mundane task that we used to have people do, right? And so why is AI different in that sense than previous attempts at automation?
Well, because it can do more than automate just the easy stuff. It can automate you. And so my general philosophy here is that AI is going to occupy the middle part of the value chain. So if you argue there's kind of the conception up front, there's the execution, and then there's the validation. I'm making this up, by the way.
Sure.
The concept and the validation will remain human, but all the operational part, execution part, is going to be AI. Well, it turns out, depending on what you're doing, That's a big chunk of what actually is
that could be
done.
99% of what you're doing, depending.
That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Depending what you're saying or
I
selling.
come up with an idea and I make sure that what I saw in the end works. So think about if you're creating a PowerPoint. You go, ooh, I want the PowerPoint to talk about our investment thesis. And here are 5 things that I wanted to include. Well, there's the conception part. Then
Yep.
the AI does the rest of it. And at the end, there's the validation part. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. So how much time did I actually spend coming up with the very beginning and the very end as a part of the total amount of time spent? It's going to turn out not much.
Well, and so that's interesting. Like, and I actually don't so far disagree with any of your perspectives, but I will say that like, there was an article in the New York Times recently, as well as some press from some billionaire tech guys, and the New York Times one was about, this is getting a lot of press about how this guy kind of went crazy talking to ChatGPT, and he thought he had invented a new form of math. And then Travis, from the founder of Uber, talks about how he sits and talks to these models and he's doing vibe physics. And I would argue difference between the crazy guy and Travis is a few $1 billion, and probably Travis a lot smarter than that. I don't know Travis, so I'll give him credit because I'm a big fan of being able to call a car and get around. But like the thing about AI that I've experienced is it does all sorts of, it does the type of thinking for you, right? Like even you and I were talking, I sent you some questions for today's podcast, and I wrote 3 sentences. It could verbally have just spoken to them to my microphone, and then it converts that into well-formed questions. Now, I still had to have an idea of what I wanted to talk to you about. Now, in this case, you're right. It didn't take a lot of time. And then StreamYard and all this other automation will make this whole process of content creation pretty fast. But there's another type of business where you're actually looking for that lightning in a bottle aha moment. I don't want to be so bold as to say like a Newtonian or an Einstein moment, but you were literally looking for the thing that, at least to date, has been uniquely defined as a human experience. And there's a lot of debate in the world of AI, whether AI will get there or not. And there's obviously people on both sides of that. But like, it's really interesting to me to see where this plays. So in practical terms, though, like the thing that I find most exciting about AI so far, like in like very simple terms that applies to e-commerce, and there's already a kind of a land rush in this, is because of the mathematical way vectors work, they understand similarities, misspellings, different languages. They understand uno and one and every other way to say the number one in any language and misspell it. And they understand intent from that perspective in a way that is just totally different than having to manually map that or try to create an algorithm to catch every possible concept. And so like my hunch is, especially for large catalogs, that this is going to be one of the first places AI really makes its mark in online commerce and in B2B commerce. Kind of what's your take there?
Where it's going to make its first mark?
Yeah.
I tend to think about these things as like the demand chain and the supply chain.
Okay.
And so I mentioned the supply chain. I think it's going to make a huge mark in terms of.
And when you say that, what kind of marks? Since I'm on the front end, not the back end usually, like I probably am pretty biased in my thinking. What are the supply chain things that you're expecting to see or already seeing?
Yeah, so it's getting that product to somebody. So
you mean to the merchant or to the end shopper or both?
Well, I'd start even earlier. Let's say you're a distributor.
Yep.
It's sourcing the product from the right supplier, having that thing sent to your warehouse, and then from your warehouse to an end customer who may or may not be a reseller, who might distribute it to somebody else. Who knows? But it's sourcing it from the manufacturer all the way to the end user, let's call it.
Sure.
There's a lot of inefficiency that's built into that. You just mentioned
especially
Uber.
in B2B, but even in general, there's a lot of inefficiency in that.
Look at what Uber brought to the process of transporting people around. I remember the first time I used Uber, and I waited like 25 minutes. I'm like, that's amazing. I don't have to wait 25 minutes. Now, if I wait more than like 4 real minutes, not 4 Uber minutes.
Yeah, 4 Uber minutes is a long time.
4 real minutes. If I wait more than 4 real minutes, I'm like, screw this. Well, you don't think this is happening in the B2B supply chain too? Like, you don't think somebody, end user, orders something, wants it tomorrow, the distributor has to source it from a manufacturer. They have to have real-time access to inventory. They have to have a contract set up for pricing. There has to be a way to deliver it to their warehouse. The people at the warehouse have to be there to receive it. That's a big thing with deliveries. You have to schedule deliveries so that people can actually take it off the truck. Otherwise, the manufacturer's truck shows up and the thing just sits there, right?
Yep.
So there's all this coordination that takes place. This is a great many-to-many problem, and it's perfect for AI.
Yep.
So that's just one example. And I haven't even gotten to how you deliver it then to the end user. That's assuming that, I mean, a lot of distributors have their own fleet of, trucks and cars and stuff like that. I think that's going to be kind of ridiculous at some point because why do I need to have a truck? There are a lot of people who send the truck out to deliver, a pack of gum, hypothetically. Right. And it's like, why don't you just have Uber Eats pick that up? Or why don't you have a guy on a bike take it for you? I mean, at the end of the day, the customer doesn't care how it got there, as long as it arrives in the condition they wanted and on time. Do I care whether it was driven in, a less than full truck load capacity, or if a dude on a bike delivers it? I don't care.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And then on the front end, like one thing we're playing with is we're getting ready to launch some AI merchandising features that are project aware. So you could say, let's say it was a construction customer, right? And so Andy's got these things in his cart. Make a guess of what his project is, or if you have a project worksheet, what else would you recommend, right? How do you foresee that kind of technology playing into B2B front ends?
Well, I think this is where it's going to get really exciting. And this is an existential thing or a philosophical thing, I should say. I think one of the great insights humanity is going to have in the next several years is that we're pretty damn predictable. We think we're special.
I totally agree with that.
Unique. Tell me you don't do many of the same things every day, especially men, right? It's not like we don't do the same stuff. And so how long is it going to take
predictable.
AI? What's that?
We're highly predictable.
Yes. How long is it going to take before AI can figure that one out? And then it'll be telling us in advance what we want, which will then eliminate the need for us to go into work and think about what we're going to do. The AI will predict, it will tell us, oh, you know what, you should be purchasing this, you should fix that, you should prioritize that. And then it'll just start doing it for you. So I know there's been a lot of discussion about AI in the medical space. And I feel like I want to go down this path because I find this as a representative example. Microsoft did a commercial, I don't know, earlier this year or last year, and their CEO even talked about it. He goes, this is the power of AI. He was talking about a radiologist. The radiologist looks at x-rays all day long, right? And, frankly, the AI has already surpassed the radiologist in terms of accuracy, et cetera. So putting that aside for a moment, here's how Microsoft pitched it in a very sort of velvet glove sort of way. The radiologist will have all these images that will come in at the end of the day. He'll go home. The next morning he'll arrive, and overnight AI is pouring through all this stuff, has figured out what the priorities are, has set his schedule for him, and has determined what the real issues are. And the guy walks in the front door and says, okay, my day's set. Well, the first thing that popped into my head is, if it can do all that, then why do you need the radiologist?
Yep.
And so I'm thinking to myself, I say that jokingly because obviously I still want a radiologist to interpret things, but this is where I think this is all going. Humans are going to still be intimately involved in these things, but you're going to need a lot fewer of them. And they're going to be more qualified and more skilled. And AI is going to do more of the heavy lifting. So this thing is coming to B2B. I think there are a lot of people involved in that middle part of the process I referred to earlier that are just frankly not going to be in the process.
I mean, I think that kind of leads to the obvious one. What happens to B2B salespeople?
I predicted years ago that we'd see fewer of them, but I think it's tangential. I think it's from a trajectory perspective, the same thing I said before. It's just going to accelerate. I had this 2x2 box, every consultant's got a 2x2. And I said the upper right-hand quadrant was sophisticated products in sophisticated organizations. That's still going to be there. You still want a human. There's a risk associated with it. There's some interpretation. You need some hand-holding, some navigating the bureaucracy. Those people are really valuable. They're the highest paid. They're not really going anywhere anytime soon. But the other quadrant in the other corner is low value product, simple organization. If you're just selling printer toner, this is Dunder Mifflin time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you work for Dunder Mifflin, in this case, you're in trouble for sure. And like, one of the questions I was going to ask you, and you kind of already answered it, is if you're not the owner of the business, because the owners of the business, unless the AI actually takes over, are still going to be in a position of authority here. But if you're in this middle value chain, if you're in this middle value, well, I hope when the AI overlords watch this in the future, they view me kindly. But when you're in the value chain there and you're not the owner of the business and you're just a participant, how would you be deriving value from your own? Like if you were a large salesperson for some large manufacturer or B2B distributor, like how would you be driving value as a sales rep?
I'll tell you, the one thing I would be doing for sure is using the hell out of AI. I'm not joking. I would AIify myself. I would be using AI to identify the ideal client profile, get the contact information, understand what people's problems are. I was talking recently with a company that had a guy who just decided to do a project on his own. And what he did was he created a version of an LLM that would search and scour the internet to find the ideal client profile for this particular company.
Yep.
Figure out what it was that the company had talked about in various places that were their problems. And it turns out they had a pretty chatty CEO who shared a lot of stuff. And come back and say, this is exactly the module you should recommend. Here's how you should phrase it. Here's the email you should send. And by the way, while I'm at it, I'm just going to go ahead and send it on your behalf and put it into a sequence.
Yep.
So you might go, oh my God, what's the salesperson doing? Well, the salesperson is the orchestrator.
Yep.
The person who put all this together and is collecting the cash for now at the end of the process. That's what I would be doing. I would not be the guy trying to pound the pavement. I would not be the guy doing Google searches to figure out what people want. I would not be the guy setting up the sequence to send it out and writing the email. I would spend all of my time figuring out how to execute this process as quickly as possible so I can make the most amount of money in the least amount of time. And I don't care what value I add. That's the way I would approach it. All I care about is getting paid. And if all these tools can do it for me, then I want to have first mover advantage and I want to do it. But you're going to run into a lot of people who are purists who are going to say, oh, I can't do that. You know, I've got to write my own emails. My customers appreciate that.
Or they'll know it's not. They'll know it's AI.
Yeah. Nobody cares. By the way, if you're solving somebody's problem, they don't care if you wrote the email or not. And this is
especially if the AI makes your emails more concise with bullets at the top. Although you can always tell the AI to stop using emojis. That's the one giveaway. But if you say no emojis, it will listen to you.
I have done this myself where I've written something thoughtfully and carefully. I've thrown it into AI. It's better.
Oh, yeah. I do that all the time.
If I hadn't written it, it wouldn't be as good. But I don't allow myself to write something and assume it's the last version. I write it, I throw it into AI, and I see what ChatGPT comes back with. I say, shorten it, make it better, make it tighter. And guess what? It does that.
Yeah. You know, I was... Miva has never been great at product marketing, and we're getting ready to launch a bunch of new products, and so we've hired this firm to help us with product marketing, and I actually think we're going to do a really good job.
Wait, the firm is called ChatGPT Incorporated?
No, thankfully. Well, that's kind of where I was going. No, they're actually doing the human portion of this, and I was in a long kickoff meeting about this yesterday, and I realized that this kind of gets to what you were just saying. The hard part here is actually doing the definition work, because once you get that part done, like once you actually have the meat of the content done, like you said, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, they're all fantastic at it, right? I actually use all three of them depending on the thing I'm trying to do. And like when I used to have to work on a presentation to do at like a trade show or something, I would have the gist of my idea and I would spend the vast majority of my time working on the minutia of the words. And I would just sit there sometimes staring at my screen like something you see in a movie about writer's block. And I'm just, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Nowadays, I literally take an audio recording of what I think my idea is, and then I'll have ChatGPT is currently, I think, the best at writing. So I'll have it kind of turn that into some points. And then when I read those points, it's missed some things. But it actually did the big next step for me and then it goes on and on and on. And like what I'm seeing and what I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing what you're seeing is that these person in the middle UIs and loops are what's really kind of the next frontier, where you set the stage. However, the AI does some work, but before it actually goes to the final recipient, there's a person who reviews it. And like, I can only imagine what that's going to do for CPQ. How will AI do pricing? Kind of, do you see are the advancements there yet? What's coming in that space?
Well, I'm probably going to blow not your mind away, but maybe the audience's mind away by saying, I don't know if CPQ is going to be here in a couple of years.
Okay. That actually does kind of blow my mind away.
Yeah, because I don't think that they're going to be humans buying these things. I think I'm going to have a bot, my buyer bot, and the seller is going to have a seller bot, and the buyer bot and the seller bot are going to buy from each other. They're going to negotiate. I'm going to sort of give it my parameters and make sure it meets certain qualifications. And then the seller bot is going to be programmed on the other end to do the same. And the bots are going to get together and decide. And then we're both going to decide ultimately whether we agree with that or not.
And like, how do you see that? Like let's say I was working on a construction project. Like, there's still a configure portion of that, I would assume. Like, how do you see the workflow? I see what you mean on the middle, right? You get out of this back and forth negotiating. The math, the AI math is going to happen quickly and efficiently, and it's going to get to what the answer was going to be.
Well, the configuration part, again, I had somebody to say this the other day, and I thought it was interesting. It's not going to be a human in the loop. It's going to be an expert in the loop. And there's a difference.
Sure.
Because you're going to have expertise to be able to guide the AI bots to do what they need to do. And you have to be an expert to confirm on the other end. So people who have a lot of expertise, some of that expertise is going to become commoditized, but some of it's going to be really important because it's going to be that finishing touch on the AI bot. So I'll be the guy who comes up with the idea at the beginning, expertise. The bot's going to do all the work. And then at the end, I'm going to be the guy who says, yes, that's what I was looking for. But I think we're going to discover there were a lot of people, and I don't say this with any joy, there were a lot of people in that middle area who are adding just a little bit of value that's now being displaced by AI. So if you think about, again, that continuum, beginning, middle, end, that middle part was the vast majority of what happened. If you could shrink that down with AI doing all that, just think about it. The beginning, the middle, and the end, it's going to get a lot smaller, which means things are going to happen a lot faster. They'll be more efficient. But all those people in that middle area, this is my great concern. I don't know what those people are going to do. There's no like retraining program to become more expert, especially if you can't get it quickly. If it takes years, but there's another argument. This is drifting a bit. There's another argument that we'll be able to be expert at anything we want to be expert at.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to Dario from Anthropic, he talks about, I won't take us too far down that path unless I'm ever lucky enough to get Dario on this podcast. But like, he talks a lot that like people need to be thinking about that. And whether it's what are currently kind of crazy French concepts like universal basic income versus like what you're just describing, I agree. There's kind of a lot of perspective that this is going to upend society faster than the Industrial Revolution, faster than the computer revolution. And I suspect that is correct. One question before we kind of move into some of the other future stuff. Like, there's been a bunch of press in the last week. This is on direct to consumer, but like Delta and United using AI to figure out, oh, you're doing a work trip by yourself. We're going to jack your price up in real time. Like, how do you see that playing out? Like, it's because if all that does that, then people are still people. We'll decide, okay, well, then I'm only going to shop via the person who, like, I'll go to the human source that can't change their price on me.
No, I think that's going to happen, but that's why a competitive marketplace still matters. Because if Delta decides to do that, my bot's going to be smart enough to figure out there might be 3 or 4 other options, and then you're going to have that, Econ 101 supply and demand optimization thing take place. But if there are limited number of options, which is why I think
if everything's duopolies, then you have a problem.
Exactly. And I think it's going to be one of the biggest issues we face. There are 2 that I think. One is, are we going to have competitive marketplaces for this stuff? Or are these LLMs going to be regulated by government? Because if there are only 2 or 3 of them, or if they're like they're specialized, then it could be that there are 2 LLMs, to your point of a duopoly, that focus on travel and entertainment. And if one of them opts out, then you don't have a monopoly. And so
Yeah.
that could be a real problem. The other one is how people are going to work. That's the other one that I don't know we have any sense for. And I have no faith that the government is going to be a factor here
Right.
in a positive way, because most of the government is made up of people who are older, who are bureaucratic, who don't understand technology or understand to move quickly. It's the time frame that scares the crap out of me. If this is the frog in
I
the
agree with
pot,
that.
if it had been, if you put the frog in the pot and over time you turn it up or turn it down, certain things happen, right? I think this is going to be one of those things where we're talking about a couple of years where people are going to go from having a comfortable lifestyle with a lot of demand for their services to having to scramble to figure out what to do next. We did a podcast recently, my partner Brian Beck and I from Master B2B, about gig work. And I have a feeling, I have a thesis that most of the work we're going to do is what I call multi-hyphenate work. And it's going to be gig work. We're all going to have like 5 or 6 different things. It's all going to be little projects that we'll bid on where we'll use AI to complete it, because you'll still have to guide it. Again, beginning and end, just a bunch of small beginning and ends all over the place. And that's how we're going to put this together. But it's going to beg the question, how do people get that work? Like, where do they go to get to learn about these opportunities? And I don't know the answer to that. Master B2B, we're happy because we think this could be what Master B's community is about, like a trusted community where people instead of
expertise.
Exactly. But is that going to be in every industry? Are we going to have like trusted communities where, Rick Wilson is looking for somebody to help him complete a project, and he goes in and says, here's the project. Somebody says, I'll do that. They got a 5-star rating. They do really great work, Uber-like, and I'll do that by tomorrow. And you like, great. And they'll just use a bunch of AI to complete it, and you'll pay them $1,000 and everybody wins. Is that the way it's going to work? I don't know.
I mean, that's plausible. I mean, that is a type of plausible outcome. I agree with you that the rate of change here is it's kind of exciting. This is as a technologist, this is actually the most exciting I've seen technology since I first got in the space in the late 90s. As a person who cares about a stable society, I have some very real concerns. The only thing is that most of my concerns don't come to pass. It's usually different things that come to pass. So
that's the unpredictable part. It's like second order and third order problems that nobody's thought about. And so it's like, wait a minute. But if you have time, you can figure things out. If you have time and competent people, the problem is we neither have time nor competent people who are going to figure this out. I'm not a dump on government guy. I'm just saying, you know what? You give a puzzle to a group of kindergartners and they're not qualified to do it, and they have no, focus. It's not going to happen.
Well, and we have a young daughter at home, and she's obviously going to grow up and she'll be native AI, right? So her whole world, she'll never know that there was a world before this, right? And it'll be funny to her that I did and all that stuff. And I think about how much I feel like I have my mind around where this is going, and probably similar to how you feel as I'm immersed in this every day. But I also acknowledge that I'm middle-aged and I'm kind of constantly working to shed old paradigms. You take that to your average person who's kind of in a head of a bureaucratic role, they're almost certainly not doing the things we're describing. Like this technology likely feels even more like magic than previous technological revolutions. Because how do you explain 1500 dimensional math to someone to understand semantic search? Like it's a very difficult thing to really get how machine learning transformed with transformers. And
but you don't need it. You can just ask ChatGPT and it'll explain it to you like you're a 5-year-old. I mean, you can
that's true.
Like that. The question is, why do I need to know about it if I'm not going to be able to do anything about it?
Well, expertise, I would argue, at least for what you and I do for a living.
No, that's certainly true. I mean, I think that is certainly true. But again, we will come out the other end of this thing, hopefully better. But I just don't think there are people who really know are scared to death.
Well, that's true. Like Dario.
And people who don't know are downplaying the whole idea that this is not going to change anything. And then there are a group of people in the middle who have heard some stuff, and then they're like, yeah, but it can't possibly be that cataclysmic or apocalyptic because how would we survive? And that is not a plan to say, I don't have an answer, therefore I'm going to go with, well, things maybe won't change too much. I mean, I do believe within 5 to 10 years, we could be looking at a radically different workplace. And if we look at a radically different workplace, we're looking at a radically different government, economic system. I mean, all this talk about Bitcoin and stuff like that, which I used to think was kind of a joke. And I still think there's a lot of stuff about it that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Could actually have just been an idea that was ahead of its time.
Well, certainly, I mean, without getting into Bitcoin and all the hype that goes into there's certainly a lot of fraud in the mass market crypto world. I don't think that's a controversial statement, but who knows? But the ability to have technology-driven capital exchange is actually, like, I've always tried to separate those two concepts out. Not that I want to go down a crypto conversation, but like the ability to digitally transfer secured assets in a way that's fraud-proof is actually a value add. Where it fits into this whole role is different. And one thing about the 10-year thing, and then we'll bring this back to B2B and CEOs. Timelines are hard to predict, but there's a lot of chatter that we're kind of 10 to 15 years out from fully functioning humanoid robots that you can merge with AI. And I think it's already going fast, but once you can replace traditional labor, which is, for at least for now, the last bastion of what humans add economically en masse, that's really where we're a bit through the looking glass. But if you were a CEO, if you were one of your customers, if you were a CEO today of a B2B business that's selling online or just any digital strategy, kind of what are the first 3 things you would tackle?
Well, one is I'd reset my mindset. And I mean that I think you have to start with no fixed premises.
Yep.
And that's really hard for somebody who's done something pretty successfully for the last 30 years. This feels like the Bill Gates moment from the 1990s, since you and I are both old enough to remember that. Remember when Netscape came
when he
along?
realized that he had misjudged the internet? Yep.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that. I don't know if you're a basketball fan, but it's the same thing in basketball. I was watching an All-Star game from like 1982 the other day, and just because I was just watching TV, and there was the 3-point line, and nobody was using it.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, I remember when that came out. I hadn't thought about that. I definitely don't go watch it. I like basketball. I don't go watch old basketball games very often.
Nobody was using it. Now it's like 40 to 50% of all the scoring.
Oh, it's a critical part of your strategy. You can't win without it.
So does that sound familiar? What if the 3-point line is like AI? And what about if there are a bunch of companies out there going, well, we could have used that. We're not going to use it. I still believe in throwing into the post and having the guy do a layup, Meanwhile, some new companies are coming along that are shooting the 3, and they're going to change the whole philosophy. And I'll give you an example, a real world example. You probably heard the other day that, who was it? It's Perplexity announced that they wanted to buy Chrome.
Yeah, I saw that.
And you got to go, what the hell is that about? There's an $18 billion company that wants to spend $37.5 billion on a product that's not even available, right?
Yep.
But they're doing this because they are an engine looking for a car, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
Google may have to spin off Chrome. I think Google's got a troubled business model right now. But I think Perplexity is an example of one of those companies that's shooting 3-point shots right now. And they're changing the game. And they're looking at Google as being one of the legacy players that's throwing the ball inside to the guy for the layup. I mean, who would have ever guessed that? So Google had better change its game. But I see companies like Perplexity, certainly OpenAI is doing this right now. Anthropic. There are these companies that are going to eat up even the most advanced software companies in the world. That should tell you how different this is, that the incumbent player who may be falling behind is Google.
And they've invented the greatest business model known to man.
That's true. That's true. Imagine where B2C companies, B2B companies, that's what worries me, is that I think this is happening a lot faster than people recognize. I do think the one thing that will save some B2B companies is that their customers, I think, are going to be resistant to doing that too. So it's going to be like sort of a demand chain of resistance where the customers are going to want to buy still from companies the traditional way. The companies are going to want to sell to them a traditional way. That could drag this thing out for a while, but there will be other customers who will not do that. They'll be the ones who shoot the 3-point shot, and they will outperform the other ones who are still throwing the ball into the post. And that could wash over all of these companies. So somebody's going to break the cartel and they're going to outperform the other ones. And then, you know what? Our PE based system, our publicly traded capitalist system is going to punish the companies that drag their feet.
Well, yeah, there is. Having had 2 sets of PE overlords so far in my career, they are relentless about their pursuit of equity value. I'm glad I'm not one of them for a living, but that's what they should do. Like that is what they've signed up to do.
Rick, you want to hear an interesting stat?
Sure.
Do you know how many publicly traded companies there are in the United States today versus where there were in 30 years ago? 1996.
I think I know the answer to this. It's like half today as there used to be.
Is.
Yeah.
There were 8,000 in 1996. There are 4,000 today. Why is that? Well, a lot of it has been acquisitions and a lot of it has been PE, and it's a lot of
they take private.
Not gone public at all. I mean, SpaceX is worth $300 billion.
Well, on Stripe and and that's a bit of a one last tangent, and I'll ask you a closing question. But like when in the dot-com boom when I was a young kid, first of all, Miva is already big enough today to have gone public by those standards. So that's kind of funny. That's kind of funny to me. But then the second thing is in 1999, 2000. I would have thought that was the ultimate goal. I don't think you could write me an Elon Musk level check that would cause me to want to be a public company CEO today. It sounds like the worst job on earth. Maybe the only other worst job would be being president, but like they sound like the worst jobs on earth. I had an early mentor tell me money goes where it's liked, and it sounds kind of quippy, but it actually is really true. And so when the public markets got too onerous, private equity grew up out of it. And likely technology will create whatever's next. Those things will exist, and then there'll be whatever's next. But like one more question on the CEO thing. Changing paradigm, I totally agree, is the most important thing. How do you measure that? Like, how would you set a KPI? Like, how would you know if you're doing it?
So I don't think the KPIs are going to change a whole lot.
Okay.
Because the KPIs are the KPIs, but who's involved, how they're involved, how it's executed, that's going to change. I mean, do we really expect that, cost of customer acquisition is going to change? That's going to still be a metric that companies are going to use.
And
who's the customer and how do you do it?
Yeah, CAC and time to return and total lifetime value, all those things stay the same.
Those are all the same because that's math that defines value in companies. Yeah. And ultimately there's going to be money, but that's a whole other discussion for another day. What happens when the money thing becomes?
Okay. We'll come back and when we do the quantum cryptography version of this podcast. But final closing question today. Other than paradigm shift, what else would you say is critical to thrive in this next 5 to 10 years?
Well, right now, the most important thing, we see this, we hear this in all of our conversations, is data. If your data as a company is not ready for AI, then you don't have a company. So if I were to put my money in one area that was deficient, it's got to be data. Because I've said this many times. You may have even heard me say this. Everything about a company can be built, borrowed, bought, stolen, replaced. The one thing that really differentiates a company is its data. Everything else, people can leave, customers can leave, facilities you can move, all that stuff, contracts can be shifted. The one thing you own that makes you a unique company is the data that you have. And if that's a mess, you don't have anything. So AI cannot work unless you've got good data. And I can tell you, most companies don't have good data. And you must see this too in the work that you do.
We see it. In fact, I would say when you look at someone, in this day and age, most people as an e-commerce platform are replacement players. They're not. Very few people are like, oh, I had an idea today. I'm gonna start a new website, unless you're selling a t-shirt, right? And it's data is where all the problems are. And I would say, kind of my thought on that is, the irony is that AI is the greatest tool in the history to fix your data. But this gets back to the expertise, the beginning and the end thing. You have to know exactly what you want it to look like, which is the human portion of this puzzle. And then you have to know how to evaluate the data on the output to make sure they did it right. Because, well, the one thing the AI will 100% do is give you a confident answer. They are the best confidence man in the history of confidence men. And so you have to have the insight of the request and know how to evaluate the output, or you will be like one of those attorneys who filed a brief that's filled with made up cases that you see in the news because of AI.
Well, I'll leave you with this thought. I heard a comedian say that the thing that scared him the most about AI is how much it actually tries to curry favor with us by saying things like, "That's a great question, Rick."
Yeah.
Well, is it ever going to tell us the truth? I mean, is it going to say, "Rick, that's a really dumb question"? Or I would phrase it very differently because you really missed the mark. So imagine a world where we're unemployed, AI is telling us we're great people and everything we do is wonderful. How does that turn out?
That's a great way to end this. Andy, thank you so much for your time. I will talk to you very soon. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back.
Thanks for tuning in to Agent of Commerce, brought to you by Miva. Explore how leading brands scale smarter at Miva.com. The future of commerce doesn't wait, and neither should you.